Course 3, Lesson 5 takes us into fractions. I actually got a new little poster up on the left side of the classroom towards the door showing some fractional parts different ways if you want to check that out if you're in the room or remember. Fractional parts are kind of fun. Fractions, if you remember, are sort of made up of a top and a bottom, so two parts to every fraction. Even if it's a whole number, it's a fraction, because you can always put one underneath a whole number. For example, the fraction 1/3 on page 31, right? It has a top number and a bottom. We call the top the numerator, the bottom the denominator. Really, when you think about it, this is maybe the part we forget. Numerator is naming the number of parts we know, or the shaded parts in the circle. If we have 1/2, 1, or the numerator, is the shaded parts. 1 over, so what's the bottom? Denominator names number of parts total, or the number of equal parts that have been divided. That's 1, 2. One of them's not shaded, but we still count it. So the bottom names how many total equal parts, right? We can find the fraction of a group, for example, half of 40. I show it like that, but really what I end up doing is I multiply this 40 by the top, or the numerator, and then I divide by this 2, the denominator. See how this looks? 40 times the numerator is 40, according to the identity property of multiplication. Then 40 divided by the denominator, 2 goes into 4 twice, and we will not have a remainder. So 1/2 of 40 is 20. So what we do is we divide by the denominator, multiply by the numerator, and according to the commutative property, it doesn't matter what order we do that in. We could have divided 40 by 2 and then multiplied by 1, it says. A quart is 32 ounces. To find the number of ounces in 3/4 of a quart, we can divide 32 by 4 to find the number of ounces in 1/4. Then we can multiply by 3 to find the number of ounces in 3/4. Okay. So a quart is 32 ounces. How many ounces are in 3/4? I just think of that as 3/4. Sorry, they got it right here. 3/4 times 32. 3/4 of 32. Of times, they're sort of interchangeable. So I think of it as multiply 32 times 3. 32 times 3 is 96. And then divide that by 4. I'm just going to do it right here. Fit that twice. 16 is 4. 24 even. Okay? I guess the value of dividing first, then multiplying, is you might be able to do it all in your head. Either way, we're getting the same answer. Example 1, there were 30 questions on a test. 1/3 were true or false. 2/5 were multiple choice. I'm just going to pick the multiple choice one to show this again. 2/5 shown in words is the same as saying this fractional part. 2/5. Of. What operation is of? Times. What's the amount I'm taking out of? Fraction of what? Of 30 questions. Or 30/1 is what? We multiply 30 by 2. Is 60. Then we divide, I'm going to write it over here so it doesn't get too messy this time, by the 5, which is 1 time and fits twice. So 12 is our final answer. It's pretty quick to type into a calculator, 30 times 2, and then take that answer divided by 5. But you should be able to do this without a calculator. It's basic, straightforward enough math. Feel free to check out letter A2 and how they did the 1/3. We're going to learn many strategies to compare fractions, but a nice one that's real simple today, all you have to do, the questions have been written so that this will work every time. Arranging, comparing fractions, just by thinking about them in relation to what is half. So the denominator 6 is what I mean. What is halfway to 6? You should be able to do that like that. 3. So if 3 is my numerator, that means this is exactly worth a half. Okay? 3/6 is an exact half. Let's compare that now to fifths. What's half of 5? It's actually 2.5 or 2.5. So if it's more than that, which the numerator is, I'm counting more than a half. So this is greater than a half, this middle one. Okay, sure enough, even if I draw this out, I see that it's not just down the middle, but it goes a little over the shaded part. Okay, 3/8. What's half of 8? That would be 4. So we see that, this is less than half, because 3, the numerator, and we see it in the picture, is less than 4, which would have been a half. So then if we want to arrange these least to greatest, we know that the middle one was more than half. So I'd write 3/5 as the biggest one. They said least to greatest, so I should go this way. The next greatest would be the exact half, 3/6, and the smallest, least first, was less than half, 3/8. Okay, so they just did that by what is a half of the denominator? Is it more, same, or less than that? Just like comparing 2/3 to 2/5. Okay, 2 is more than a half of 3. Half of 3 is like 1.5. So since 2 is bigger, that means this 2/3 is worth more than a half, right? Whereas 2 is less than half of 5, because half of 5 would be 2.5. So 2 is less than that, which means this is less than a half. Just comparing it to what's half of the denominator. So the 2/3 is bigger. We make it eat the bigger one. Okay. Looking at lesson practice, you're going to use the first part of our lesson for A and B. And then do D, please. A, B, D.